to another episode of the Indie Film Group. I am your host, Brianna Young. And joining us is going to be a very talented music composer. His name is Darryl John Hannan. He has composed music for many feature-length movies and tons of short films. So we're going to have a great episode today talking about music composing for feature-length films, short films, and just all content under the above. So we have Darryl with us, so he'll be joining us now. Hey, Darryl.
Hey, thanks for having me.
You're coming live from the UK right now. It's midnight where you are.
It is. It's past my bedtime usually, but I figured I'd make an exception for you guys.
Oh, well, thank you. We're very pleased that you're willing to do that. But so are you in the middle of working on anything right now?
I'm just coming into a new short for a filmmaker from Indiana called Stefan Whitaker. It's basically a short film that he's done. So that's just about to kick off next week. It's been a little bit more quiet than I would have hoped given coronavirus. It's kind of put a lot of projects either in the bin or sort of delayed. But things are starting to pick back up again now, which is good. It's kind of come quite a lot all in a short period of time. It's been like very quiet for like probably 4 or 5 months, and then I've had like 3 or 4 projects sort of fall into my sort of inbox in the last sort of 3 or 4 weeks, which has been good. It's good to see that like the indie film world is sort of reviving itself.
And I think that's so cool. I mean, you just said that you're working with someone from Indiana, and
Yeah.
you're in the UK. So most of the people that you work with are they in America?
A good amount, yeah. I mean, with composing, especially with a lot of post-production roles, remote working is quite easy because I don't have to physically be there on the shoot. So I do a lot of work with guys from America all over. I've done quite a lot of films with American directors and producers, a lot of UK ones as well. But yeah, so probably I think in the stuff I've done, a good at least 60%, I would say, have been American, just because with that remote working with tech, as is now, it's so easy to just interface with people that are thousands of miles away quite seamlessly.
Exactly, and especially the time that we're in right now. I mean, most of us filmmakers, we're kind of Zooming with everyone right now to be finishing projects. So, I mean, I'm glad that it's working out for you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been kind of strange because with a lot of the work I do being remote anyway, coronavirus hasn't really changed that aspect of it really at all. It's just meant that the filming couldn't go on, so that's kind of delayed things. But yeah, it's kind of because I do a lot of remote working anyway, so it's kind of brought everything into what I'm more used to, which is kind of bizarre in a weird way.
So, at what age did you start composing music? Or, I mean, when did you get that idea to say, I want to be a music composer for movies?
For movies, probably around, I think it was around 18. But I've been doing some musical stuff since I was about 12. I started playing guitar, wanting to be that sort of stereotypical rock star. If you ever find any photos of me in my early or mid-teens, I have very long, greasy, mostly hair, a guitar around my neck, and was in bands from probably about 12 or 13 up until probably my mid-20s, actually. So that's kind of how it all started, was like hearing Iron Maiden albums when I was 12 and it just blowing my mind. And then that's all I wanted to do, was be a rock star all the way through like high school and college and that sort of thing, was to do that. But when I was doing my A levels, which is sort of like at the end of high school equivalents for you guys, I were doing something on film music, and I heard the score for Danny Elfman's Batman for the 1989 Batman film, and that was just a whole another level of music. Just like I remember there's the Waltz to the Death scene, which we studied really in depth, and just what Danny Elfman did with tempo and sort of all these really clever subtextual things, it just kind of struck me as like, as great as much as I love like sort of doing rock music and being in bands, it just had this whole extra depth to it of these extra things that he was doing to portray these very kind of subtle things. and it just like completely opened this whole new world up to me. And it's been trying to just do that myself as closely as I can ever since, really.
And I want to talk about because you were just kind of mentioning it right now, using. You were saying that Danny Elfman, you know, what he used, he just kind of opened up a new world. Whenever
Yeah.
you watch whenever you're handed a project, and there's no music composing in it yet,
Yeah.
are you like, okay, is this really bad? Or you're just like, no, there's just no music composing in it yet, so it's not a full movie yet. I just want to say, music composing is a huge, it just adds to the story world. It's like another tool to
definitely
do more storytelling for the film.
Yeah, absolutely. The only thing that's really consistent is when you watch sort of an edit without music. The edit's always, it just feels slower. I don't know why, but without the music, kind of gives it drive, and everything just feels a little slower. But it's never bad. It's just incomplete.
It's incomplete, yeah.
Yeah. So there's very few times, apart from maybe some projects when I did really early on, when I was a student, but then the filmmakers were students as well, where things were like, this needs a bit of, we're not sure about X, Y, Z for this. But yeah, a lot of the time, especially if I'm sort of spotting with the director, we'll be bouncing ideas off each other. So I can almost kind of in my head work out, this scene, I can almost hear what should be there. And then we sort of have that collaborative sort of session to work out, this is the film as it is, and this is what we both think should go over here and then over there, and then. So yeah, it's never bad. It's always just, as I say, incomplete at that stage.
Well, I just want to say you make the film director just feel so better, because whenever they get their locked cut, and it's, we almost want to throw up, because there's still there's not the music in it, there's no sound composing, all of that, it'll just feel like not a complete movie yet. So when the music composer comes in, I feel like you guys are just saving our butts, because you guys can either make our films or break them. But I mean, most of the time it's really just making them better. I feel like the editor can actually break it.
Yeah. I mean, I think even further than that, I think you have to build, especially in my experience working on films that I have, if you have a good story that you build on, everything else can be either good or bad. But if you've got a bad story to start with, then you can never really make anything that's that you can never really save it at that point. Thankfully, the vast majority of the films I've had have always had really good stories, so the editing and everything else is just bonuses on top of that.
But yeah, so you have fun doing it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's not something that I do because I'm someone's forcing me to do it. It's something that I really enjoy, and something that is that when you, especially when you have that sort of that moment where you kind of have this idea and it clicks in, and you see you in your sort of workstation with the film and the music all come together and everything just falls into place. It's really, really special to have that. Yeah.
So can you kind of guide us through these steps? Say a film director contacts you, they're like, here's my project. What steps do you go through to start building your music story world and composing? And I don't know if it's different for you doing a feature or doing a short film, but you can maybe compare the two also.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so usually if someone's contacted me and said, I want you to do this film, if it's not shot already, I always like to read the script and do like a sort of demo for the director, just so they can have an idea of where I'm coming from with the score. I always find that can be quite interesting, especially when there's no visuals, and if the director doesn't always have an idea of what they want the music to be yet. Knowing where I'm sort of coming from a sort of composer's perspective, can either tell them, oh yeah, that's great, we'll explore this further, or oh no, I really don't like that, can we do something else? And that already eliminates a whole sort of line of style. So that's what I would usually do. Once we've got sort of the locked picture, I'd do what we call a sort of spotting session, which basically means we'll sit through, me and the director, either sort of in person in my studio or sort of over Zoom or whatever, and we'll go through the film from start to finish, working out what scenes need music and what music should go in those scenes, and sort of bigger kind of stylistic conversations about what sort of score they want ultimately. Once we've got that nailed in and we know what we want and where we want it, I like to work chronologically through the film, and that's the same for shorts and features. I like to start at the beginning and end at the end. Just kind of makes more logical sense with me. I've tried it where I skip all in around and I just get in a muddle. So I like just work through it. And then what I tend to do is have cues finished, and then send drafts off to the director, and then they can sort of give me feedback or notes on what they want changed or what they like and how we can make it sort of more in line with the sort of shared vision of the film. And then eventually we get through all of the cues and then we're done. With sort of locally, sort of like UK based directors, I really like it when it can be more sort of colloquial, I guess. So you have, you don't have like finished draft, send it off for approval or get it back rejected. You kind of have the director kind of in the room as much as possible. So you can sort of have those conversations, go, oh, have a listen to this. And then you kind of play a little bit of something when you're kind of just noodling around. And then they can go, oh yeah, what about this? And then you can kind of have a more collaborative sort of experience rather than a more formal one where it's like, here's my finished cue. Is it good or is it bad? And they go, oh no, it's good or bad because of X, Y, Z. It's more kind of formal in my perception. Whereas I like working on films because it's a collaborative. It's basically it's a team experience. Even though certain parts are done by certain people, it's a big group effort, and I want to involve director sort of as much as I can.
I love that. And actually,
in that stage.
That was going to answer my next question. So you're working very closely with your director and producer.
Yeah.
And I just want to say, I feel like when it kind of goes towards post-production, you know, all the crew is gone. All of like the on-set crew, they're at home. They're waiting for that movie to come out. They're like, why has it been a year and the movie's not out yet? Well, there's a lot of work. There's a lot of sound issues, guys. But so you're a music composer. You kind of work a lot alone. But I love that you're saying that you're still part of the team and you still want to get the director and producer involved as much as you can. So
Yeah,
how many like edits are you willing to do before it's like, okay, guys, I mean, this is a lot of notes?
Usually,
like changes.
Yeah, I mean, thankfully so far I haven't encountered it where there's been a massive amount of revisions needed. I think the most I've had was, I think for one scene of a feature I did about 4 or 5 years ago, I had about 20 different revisions, which was the most I've ever had by a long stretch. But yeah, I mean, I'm paid a fee for a score, so I tend to just absorb that unless it's getting ridiculous, which it thankfully never had to have that conversation. But I kind of view it as I'm there to provide a score, and if we need lots and lots of conversations to get this certain scene right, that's just part of it. And we have deadlines to meet, so if I have to do lots of revisions for this one cue, that then means I have to have less sleep ultimately. but we
have to hit our deadlines.
Exactly, yeah. So I view it as I'm there to do the job, and if loads of revisions are needed to have that job be done, then that's what needs to be done.
So what kind of software do you use?
I use Logic Pro 10 at the moment. I'm on a Mac fanboy. Yeah, it works quite well. I'm yet to update the latest what's the word? The OS X, just because I have major trauma issues from when I did it last time, and none of my plugins worked for like 3 months.
Oh no.
Yeah, so whenever I always do that, like updates on like off time, because then if it like murders everything, I have to recalibrate the computer. I don't have to have a deadline in 2 weeks and go, oh god.
Oh god, what am I gonna do? So do you ever record on live instruments?
Yeah, as much as I can.
As much as
it's
you
not
can?
always.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, it's not always possible with budget restraints. And thankfully, the samples I have, I've learned how to use them enough to make it sound as realistic as I can. But I always would prefer live instruments whenever possible.
I think we all would.
Yeah, I mean, even one trick that I've learned over the years is even if you have one live instrument, that will then trick the ear of the listener into thinking the rest is real. So, like, if you
Oh.
have, say, a chamber orchestra, and you have just the solo instrument, so you have like a sort of solo violin, a solo trumpet, French horn, etc. You just need to get those three instruments to put the melodies on that, and because the listener identifies that, oh, that's real, I know that's real, they can't then differentiate, say the rest isn't. If one thing's real, your brain just goes, oh, well, then it's all real. So that's a neat little trick that I picked up at university
I like
to
that.
yeah, to basically make it easier to
I'm
basically
gonna
fake it until you can make it.
I'm gonna put that in my little tool, my filmmaking toolbox. They call it.
Nice.
So
Yeah,
if
a lot
anyone,
of
sorry, Daryl,
so
what?
oh yeah, no, I was just going to say a lot of especially with like short films, you can get away with especially if they're more intimately shot, like a smaller cast, that sort of thing. You don't necessarily need a big orchestra to have that score. The style would need a smaller ensemble anyway,
Yeah.
so you can then almost make that creative decision with that in mind of going, well, I'm this film needs a smaller sort of palette for the score, and then I can afford two of those five instruments, for example, and then you've got a good portion of it that's live anyway.
Oh my! I'm telling you, if I got the budget, I would make my next movie shooting on film and getting a whole entire live orchestra.
Oh
That
yeah,
would
no,
be.
that's the dream. I unfortunately haven't had a live orchestra on one of my scores yet, but
Wouldn't that
that's
be
a
insane?
dream of mine. Yeah, fingers crossed.
So I just want to
Hopefully
say,
soon.
if anyone has any questions for Daryl throughout our interview, please
Mhm.
ask. Do we have any questions, Ricky? Yet?
We don't have any questions yet.
No questions yet, but get those questions in.
Cool. Happy to answer.
So, what tools do you recommend to be using in when you're designing
What
your music? What
what
tools?
tools did you
Like,
say?
yeah, that
It
might be
really
a big
varies on
question.
it varies a lot on what you want to do and what your style is even. Um, for tools, I mean, I use, as I say, I use Logic as my main sort of workstation, which I know I've learned that over the years and know it really well. I haven't quite learned all of the key commands, but I must be close by now. And I have a sort of stable house of plugins that I use and I know that work really well. So I'm a big fan of Fab Filter. Doing some really good stuff. Um, But yeah, I mean, for me, I wouldn't necessarily say there's any specific tools, like physically tools, that you have to use. Find your own sound ultimately, and if you that will be born on what you have, and then as you accrue new kit and new hardware, software as well, that will then shape your sound, and how you use that will then make your sound more yourself. And then, so yeah, I wouldn't say there's anything essential for anyone to use. Just learn what you have got and what you use, learn it really well, and then you'll know how to get the best out of it ultimately. So a bit of a cop out answer.
No, I'm sure a lot of people are taking notes also.
We got a question.
Hey,
It's
Nice.
Boucher.
Boucher.
Hey Boucher.
Hey, Christophe. I hope you're feeling better in the hospital.
He says, "Hey Daryl, do you like keeping up with the latest sample libraries, or do you have a go-to?"
I try to, but my wife doesn't let me buy as many as I would like. I own a few Spitfire ones which are really good. I've got their Albion orchestral ones which I really like, and I've got a few East West Quantum Leap ones as well, which I've had for ages now. But yeah, I keep an eye out on it, and often there's like deals and sales on where I might just try and get one without my wife realizing. Um, but yeah,
Is she in
usually
the room right now?
she's in bed, thankfully. I don't think she can hear me.
Oh, it's midnight there. That's right. Oh.
But yeah, and I tend to just, especially with yeah, as I say, using what you have and learning that really well. I've got the Spitfire libraries and the East West libraries, and I tend to use them quite a lot and use them for most things. And there's a few things that I'll kind of buy for specialist things. Like there's a thing that I bought the other day called, I think it's called Crime Sonic or something, which is a really specific thing for a certain sort of like crime thriller sound. So I'll buy sort of specific things here and there if scores need it, and if what I have doesn't mean that I can do what I need to do. But usually I have my core stuff and I stick with that.
We got another question.
Oh, we're on a roll here.
Nice.
This one's from John Blythe. He says, Darryl,
Nice.
any comments on utilizing the sharing sessions that some of the major orchestras can do for a film project?
Yeah, no, definitely. It's not something I've been able to take advantage of yet, but there's a lot of them, especially in sort of more Eastern Europe. There's Budapest have one where they have their orchestra, and you basically, as you say, share the session. So people put in. It's a much more budget-friendly way of doing it. So you basically would, if the orchestra's there for a whole day, you book a couple of hours, get it for cheaper than if you would have to hire the whole day yourself. And sort of a good way of getting a really good orchestral sound. But because it's in those countries where the players aren't as heavily unionized, it's a bit cheaper, but the quality is fantastic. There's one in north of England near Manchester, which has just started up. So I'm keen to investigate using them a bit more when I have projects that have the budget to allow it. But yeah, definitely something that I want to do in the future if and when projects come up with the budget to facilitate that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Now I have a question.
Go for it.
So there's a lot of aspiring film music composers out there. How would you recommend for them to get started on their first short, or how do they get working and start building their contact list?
Yeah, I mean, the best way to do it is, I mean, with coronavirus, that kind of puts a bit of a sort of dampener on it, but in-person networking is the way to go, I would say. You can do a lot on Facebook, and I've made a lot of really good connections through Facebook and through social media. But the connections that you make in person they always kind of sort of stick a bit better. If you're sort of physically having a conversation with someone in a room, face to face, you can then build that rapport up more effectively, I would say. But what I would do is, if they're sort of just starting out and they're sort of looking to get their first gig, you don't have to necessarily have short films that you've worked on to then build a portfolio. You can take scenes from other films off YouTube, rescore them under your own sort of music, put them up. As long as it's not monetized, YouTube should allow it anyway. And then you can then not only hone your craft, but also show potential clients what you can do with the sort of guise of, if I were to work on, say, Jason Bourne, for example, this would be what I would do in this scene. And they can kind of get a feel of what your style is and sort of what your capabilities are as well. And then, just network your butt off, and eventually you'll get that gig.
So would you recommend that some people maybe start off working for free, or working for trade?
It's quite a divisive subject. There's a lot of difference of opinion on the forums that I'm in. I think at the very start you kind of don't have any option but to work for free. Unfortunately, you have to just get your foot in and get your portfolio built up and get your name out there to a certain extent. And also, if you're starting out, you would need that experience under your belt to then not only improve your music writing, but also your sort of just experience in the industry itself. With working for free, I think it's unavoidable at the start. But once you get to a point where you can get to a position where you've worked on quite a few films, hopefully you have a few years under your belt, I would recommend you sort of have to have a value to your own work. And otherwise you can't really expect anybody else to put value to it either. My rule of thumb for sort of new projects is it has to tick 2 of the 3 out of sort of 3 criteria. So it's either got to be soul or finance or time. So it's either got to be good for the soul, so it's something that I really, really want to do. It's either got to be, or it's got to pay well, or pay pay my fee ultimately, or it's got to sort of be good for sort of the time of my career. So it's either got to have one of those, so 2 of those 3 things. for me to go, yeah, this is great. So if it's like something's really, really great, but it doesn't pay, but it's, could be good to build this connection with this director, then potentially I'd look to waive the fee because it's hit the other two. But then at the same brush, if it's a project that I'm like, well, I'm not loving it, like it's okay, I understand what it's doing, but it's not something that's really sort of lighting a fire under me. But it pays my fee, and also the connections would be good to do that. Then I also, would do that. And then, the third one as well. So that's kind of my criteria. Once so I've got to this stage, is it needs to satisfy two of those three. Otherwise, I turn the gig down.
I love that. I love that you've set the bar for yourself, so you have those two little things that you have to hit. I like that.
Yeah, I picked up one of my friends from a composer forum. He kind of posted it, and I was like, "That's genius," and that's been my sort of go-to ever since, really.
So if you had, say, if you could choose any project that you would want to do, what kind of style do you like to float towards more, and why?
That's a really tricky question. I think not necessarily stylistically, musically, but
Like genres.
if there was opportunity to do a Batman film, I think that would be like the sort of the dream, as it were, because especially given the sort of poetic hitting back to Danny Elfman's Batman being brought me into film music. I also like Batman anyway. I always sort of have as a kid, so that's kind of just would line everything up in a really sort of poetic way for me. But yeah, I haven't done. I mean, action films are always really fun to do. You get the sort of big textures, and you can be really sort of like aggressive with it. So yeah, that probably would be the dream gig. I quite like doing romantic comedies though. I've done a few of them, and they're always fun, especially the quirkier ones. You can kind of, it's not quite as in your face, the music, but it gives you room to sort of have fun with what's going on underneath a lot of dialogue, because there's usually quite a lot of dialogue in that, so that it presents a different challenge. So yeah, probably I think if it was like the best romantic comedy in the world at the moment, or Batman, I would choose Batman still though.
Have you ever composed for a horror film?
I have, about 3 or 4 horror films.
So is composing for a horror film different than other films that you've done?
Yeah, quite a lot. Horror. I've always found horror to be the most artistic of films. Like there's less formula to them. Like romantic comedies, for example, tend to follow the same story structure. The 3 acts. It doesn't vary or stray far from that. Horror films can just do anything. They can just be. There's so much more scope for artistic.
They can be weird
kind of,
and raw.
I mean,
and
there's
emotional
even within like the sort of generic Hollywood ones, there's still such diversity in what they do and how they do it, which is really interesting. Horror films, from a scoring perspective, it depends on what sort of like subgenre, of course, but a lot of it is more soundscapey, I've found, and more like ambience, just to give that sort of sense of dread. You tend to, if there's like jump scares, you build up to those and you hit those points. But then other sort of horror films I've done have been a lot more, as you say, sort of more emotional based. So it's different again. So I think, horror films are a lot less predictable. I find they're very very fun to do. And I remember there was one I did a couple of years ago where I worked sort of into the night because I just had a real role on it, and I had to just stop because I was starting to freak myself out a little bit with the film, the music. Yeah, it was just because it was really dark and I was on my own, and the music was really creepy and the film was really scary, and I was like, I need to just go into a really well lit room and just breathe for a bit.
Because you were scaring your own self, but hey, your music was scaring you, so that's good.
It was a testament to how effective the film was. But and I had to just have a sit down and a breathe and a cup of tea.
I have to say,
I got another question.
Heck yeah.
Okay, it's Boucher again. He says, do you like to sketch your ideas out on a piano, or do you prefer pulling a specific instrument?
I am terrible at piano. So I think if I did that, it would only slow me down. But I tend to sketch out into my workstation mostly. It depends because I play guitar. So if there's a guitar sort of in the score, I can sometimes have a bit of a sort of noodle on that and sometimes work out some ideas. But the vast majority of the time, I will kind of be at my workstation. I have like a piano there, and I can play enough to know where the notes are and have a bit of a workout with harmony stuff. But most of it is digital, into the sort of using my mouse and plotting things out. So yeah, not as instrumentally based as I would like, and I imagine from a majority of composers, I may well be the exception for that. But yeah, a lot of it is like more in the computer itself. Apart from some harmonies I'll do on a piano just to sort of get a feel of where I want it to go. But yeah, mostly it's computer based rather than instrument based. And then once I have a rough idea, I can then bring other things in and work out on instruments if needed.
Nice.
Great.
We have another comment, just a comment, and I'm going to butcher this name. It's Kehan Hawkins says, good information.
Nice.
Good information, guys.
Yeah, good information.
Thanks for
Glad to
listening,
hear.
guys. So I have a few more questions also. So what
Sure.
advice would you offer to aspiring composers? Just advice in general.
Yeah,
Good
I think
advice.
what's sort of there's two main things which I would sort of advise if they're sort of aspiring is it's definitely a marathon, it's not a sprint. So don't be disheartened if you don't get success quickly or as quick as you would want it to happen. It really is the luck of the draw with a lot of these things. If you make sort of connections, it's mostly born out of just luck. At the end of the day, you have to be good at what you're doing and put yourself in those right situations. But it's ultimately luck will get that right director at the right place at the right time to make everything kind of explode and get that break for you. So yeah, don't worry if it doesn't feel like it's happening as fast as you feel it should. Just kind of plod through and just keep pushing, and it'll eventually get there. If you can't keep putting yourself out there and keep putting yourself in the situations where people notice you and like potentially put yourself out there to be seen by potential clients, it might happen eventually. It may not, but that's kind of the risk everyone takes. But you have to just keep persevering and be resilient. And I think the other advice I'd give is not to expect it to come to you. You have to be ridiculously proactive with this sort of stuff. You have to go seeking jobs. You have to go seeking connections. You could be like as good as Hans Zimmer and Danny Elfman combined, but if you sit in your bedroom waiting for the phone to ring, it won't. You have to then, do the legwork and be a salesman ultimately, and just sell yourself as much as you can into the industry. And then the phone will start ringing once you have made that initial step, but you have to be proactive.
I love that. Ring, ring, ring. The phones are ringing because you're putting in work.
Yeah, I mean, there's loads of people I've seen on like forums, for example, where they're like, "Oh, why have I not got an agent?" I bet you're not calling agencies.
You're not calling agencies. That's me right now. I'm like, why don't I have a directing agent? Like, I'll get one Monday.
Yeah. But yeah, you don't, same with those things, you don't ask, you don't get. So
Exactly.
in the same breath, if you are worried that an agent won't want you, often is the case that if an agent will approach you if you're at the level that they will, demand, your demand will be enough for you that they'll want to represent you. But on the flip side, they won't know about you unless you email or call. So yeah,
My name
exactly.
is Brianna Young. I'm a director that you cannot live without. I'm sure you want to manage me. I'm making lots of films, and I'm going to make you a lot of money. So if you're listening in there, managers.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be silly to turn that down. So
it would be hard to turn that down.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thank you so much.
Wait, we got some more questions.
Yes, we love that.
Nice.
Okay, so he corrected me. It's Ki Wan. So he said, cool way to pronounce it. What film did you score that after watching it, you just knew that you nailed the score? Like one. I think that's what he's trying to get at.
Ooh. There's been a few, thankfully. I think the film I did called Kept Boy, which was by George Bamber about 3 or 4 years ago. That was a really good one, and I was fortunate enough because it came to me. It was a really quick turnaround on that one. I think it was a feature. It was I think about 100 minutes, and they're like, "Oh, we've got 4 weeks. We need the score done." And I was like, "Yep, okay, great, let's do it." Anyway, I want sort of an indie folk band.
Wait, did he say 3 to 4 weeks? Wait, I'm sorry. Did he say 3 to
Yeah.
4 weeks? Was it a short
Yeah,
film?
no, it was 100 minutes.
Wait,
So,
so
I
you were
had,
given the project 3 to 4 weeks before it had to be done?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so what happens, guys?
Yeah, it does happen, and you just have to roll with it, ultimately. It was a really good project. They sent me a few of the rushes on it, and it looked great. So I was like, yeah, let's do it. I don't need to sleep for a month. That's fine.
I don't need to sleep for a month.
Yeah. So and that turned out really, really well. I managed to. There's a band that I knew from uni who were called Stolen Horse. They were great. I basically approached them and said, look, I've got this film. They want a folk band kind of vibe. They were a folk band and they were really, really good. So I was like, oh, that's brilliant. I can just, if I can get them to help, then that will fall into place really nicely. They were really great. We worked together. We sort of did a bit of a hybrid thing. So we had a few of their needle drops in the film as well. But also they sent me a few stems from their new album that was about to come out. So I kind of composed a mixture of sort of stems and score together, which meant that we could get the deadline met. I think it was 5 weeks in the end. But yeah, that sounded really good, especially with the mix of sort of their band stuff and sort of more sort of orchestral and sort of synth based stuff. There's a couple of scenes out there that I just sat back and just went, oh yeah, that's it. You can just kind of feel that everything is just in complete harmony. And yeah, that was my favorite one, I think, so far. I would say, where there was a few points where everything just lined up perfectly, and you just kind of sit back in the chair and just go, yeah, that's it, nailed it. But yeah, it's happened. I mean, usually, sorry, go on.
No, keep going.
I was just saying, it happens, for most films as well. I mean, I'm quite a perfectionist, which often works against me, if anything. My wife will always say, thankfully my wife is quite musical as well. Like she's grade 8 piano and flute. So she will, I always get her on my score. I need piano or flute. It's like having that to hand is really come in handy. But she'll
that's why
come
I married her.
Yeah. Just need session musicians. But yeah, she'll come in, and I always value her opinion a lot because she's got a really good ear as well. And she will often tell me, don't touch it, it's done. And I'm like, oh, but I could tweak this. She's like, no, it's done. Don't do what you always do and just over tweak it and then I ruin it. So she's like, it's done, move on. I'm like, okay, great.
Aren't you so lucky to have her? Oh my God, can you imagine if you just
Definitely.
over tweaked everything?
Oh yeah, no, that happened a lot before we met.
Aww.
She's helped me be more efficient, definitely, by just saying no, leave it, don't do anything else. And I was like, but I could add another line. No, stop it. I'm like, okay, fine.
So I do kind of want to circle back to something that you were saying. You were given a project like 3 weeks before it was supposed to be done. How many months do you actually do you want to spend on something, or do you expect to spend on something properly, like a feature?
For a feature, it really depends. It's been quite varied. That was certainly the shortest I've done turnaround. If I didn't have Stolen Horse to sort of help.
That's
that was a condensed work time, to say the least. But with that one, if Stolen Horse really helped me out on that one, and without their album, it would have been a real struggle to get that all sorted. Usually for a feature, I think especially nowadays, I think 8 weeks would be fine, depending on what is needed. If there's recording time after it's written, then that will obviously take a bit longer. Just physically composing time, 8 weeks is usually fine. And shorts, depending on their length and what style they need. If they need bigger like sound palettes, it will take a little bit longer. But if they're like quite small in ensemble, and depending on what the director needs, certainly like if they give me a deadline, I will do my best to meet it. And I've done a short in 2 weeks before, which has been again a bit of a push, but certainly doable. But yeah, usually I would like, if I can decide my own deadlines, which never happens, and you shouldn't expect that ever to happen. If I could have a month to 6 weeks on a short would be ideal, because that gives you enough time to explore a lot of things. But I could certainly do it in less. And yes, ideally, if I could choose, 3 months on a feature would probably be where I'm at. But again, it can be done a lot quicker. It's just if you have that breathing room to sort of have that extra time to really explore things and allow time to be more collaborative with the director in the early stages, that can really be beneficial. But then on the flip side, I work well to a tight deadline. So if people give me too long, sometimes I will then follow these rabbit holes down. Oh, maybe this will work, and then second guess what I'm doing if I know I have time. Whereas if I don't have time, I have to go on instinct, and I have to just kind of shut anything else. Oh, what about this? No time. And that often leads to sort of some of my best work, because I've not allowed myself to distract myself ultimately with, oh, but maybe this will work better. My instincts are quite good, thankfully, and if I don't have the luxury of not trusting them and only not trusting them, it turns out quite well usually.
And it's also nice to hit deadlines and just make your director and producer proud. So, because you obviously want to work with them again and keep working with them,
course.
or they want you want to have them recommend you to other people, and
yeah, of course, yeah.
You'll be passed around the filmmaking group.
Yeah, that's the ideal. And ultimately, as is any job, if a job's worth doing, it's worth doing well, and especially if it's like a film that I really enjoy anyway. I want to make it as best as it can be, and I want to make sure that director's vision is met as much as they want it, met fully. But yeah, it's kind of weird. I never really think about it that way. I probably should. It might help my career, but I never really think of it as like, oh, I should do this well because this will benefit me. I always think of it, oh, I should do this well because the film deserves it, or the director, he has this idea, or she has this idea. I want to make that happen, and I want to work with them to make ultimately their kind of creative vision come to life.
I just looked at the clock. It was 4:44. I love those numbers.
Nice.
And what time? So it would be 12. What time is it at your place?
1:45 for me.
1:45. Oh, we need to get you to bed, John. Well, thank you so much. It's all good. But thank you so much for coming on and talking to us. I know
the pleasure was all mine.
A lot of people have learned a lot today. I've learned a lot. I want to work with you now. I think you're very level-headed. I love your attitude, and I haven't.
Awesome.
I wish that we had some stuff to show today. Like some of your work, so other people could see it. But so where can people see your work, or like?
So I've got my website, which is www.djhcomposer.co.uk, and if they do /portfolio, they can hear I think there's 11 now examples of just various genres of stuff that I've done, so they can have to my work there. I'm on most social media stuff. It's usually DJH Composer. It's like at DJH Composer on Twitter and Instagram. I forget what other stuff I have. I'm not really good at keeping updated, if I'm honest. But yeah, usually if you type in DJH Composer, I'll come up eventually. And yeah, I'm obviously Darryl John Hannan on Facebook, which is if you do DJH Composer on there, that will bring my fan page up as well.
Awesome, guys. So yeah, make sure to go and give him a follow. If you guys have any more questions, go over to his Instagram and shoot him a DM.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us today on the Indie Film Group. We really appreciate it. And
no worries. Thank you for having me.
I'm going to start following you on Instagram too. We should work together.
Yeah, sounds great. I'd be well up for that.
Awesome. Well, good night, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.
Right, I'm going to go to bed and try not to wake up my wife.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Darryl.
Thank you,
cool.
Darryl.
Cheers, guys.
It was
It's
nice
been really
meeting
fun.
you.
Really, thank you. Yeah, you too, and thank you very much for having me.
Okay.
All right, guys. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to another episode of the Indie Film Group. This was an awesome episode. Let's keep growing together as filmmakers together. So tune in next week to our next episode of the Indie Film Group, only at 4 p.m. PST. We'll see you next time. Hey guys, thanks for watching. Be sure to like the video and like the page, and we'll see you next week. If you want to be a guest on our show, just email me at brianna@hecticfilms.com.
Me. Cut. Man, this movie sucks. I'm out of here. What am I gonna do? I'm out of money.
Are you trying to make a movie, but you're running out of locations, crew, or even money? Buy my book, Cheap Movie Tricks, today and invest in your filmmaking career.